about some more concepts from this book. I finished this book, End of Days, and it has this, I'm kind of picking this section out because it's going to talk about the Abomination of Desolation happening quite a long time ago, not having to do with Obama. And I'm not saying that I know, I'm just kind of offering this for people who pay attention to this kind of thing. But it starts here with Ezekiel. Get this to focus. Hold on. Page 229 in the chapter When the Gods Left the Earth. Says, Ezekiel, a priest of Yahweh in Jerusalem, was among the aristocracy and craftsmen who had been exiled together with King Jehoiachin after Nebuchadnezzar's first attack on Jerusalem in 598 BCE. They were forcefully taken to northern Mesopotamia, settling in the district of the Kabar River, just a short distance away from their ancestral home in Haran. And it was there that Ezekiel's famous vision of the celestial chariot had occurred. As a trained priest, he too recorded the place and the date. It was on the 5th day of the 4th month of the 5th year of the exile, 594/593 BCE, when I was among the exiles on the bank of the river Kebar, that the heavens opened up, and I saw visions of the Elohim. Ezekiel stated at the very beginning of his prophecies what he saw. Appearing in a whirlwind, flashing lights, and surrounded by a radiance, there was a divine chariot that could go up and down and sideways, and within it, upon the likeness of a throne, a semblance of a man. And he heard a voice addressing him as the Son of Man and announcing his prophetic assignment. The prophet's opening statement is usually translated as visions of God, and the term Elohim, which is plural, has been translated as God in the singular. Translated is kind of a nice word for distorted, right? I don't think that it was translated. I think it was distorted. And when the Bible itself clearly treats it in the plural, as in Elohim, let us fashion Adam in our image and after our likeness, Genesis 1:26, as readers of my books now know, the biblical Adam tale is a rendering of the much more detailed Sumerian creation texts, where it was an Anunnaki team led by Enki that used genetic engineering to fashion the Adam. And I guess Adam, from my readings in other books, means work donkey. That's what it means. The term Elohim, we have shown over and over again, referred to the Anunnaki. And what Ezekiel reported was that he encountered an Anunnaki celestial craft near Haran. The celestial craft was seen by Ezekiel. Was described by him in the opening chapter and thereafter as God's kavod, that which is heavy. The very same term used in Exodus to describe the divine vehicle that had landed on Mount Sinai. The craft's description rendered by Ezekiel inspired generations of scholars and artists, and resulting depictions have changed with time as our own technology of flight vehicles has advanced. Ancient texts refer to both spacecraft and aircraft and describe Enlil, Enki, Ninurta, Marduk, Thoth, Sin, Shamash, and Ishtar, to name the most prominent, as gods who possessed aircraft and could roam Earth's skies or engage in aerial battles, as between Horus and Seth or Ninurta and Anzu, not to mention the Indo-European gods. Of all the varied textual descriptions and pictorial descriptions of the celestial boats of the gods, the most appropriate to Ezekiel's vision of a whirlwind appears to be the whirlwind chariot depicted at the site in Jordan, figure 103. So I guess this is a drawing from Jordan of these craft, and they have these pillars, these tripods when they come down, from which prophet Elijah was taken up to heaven, helicopter-like. It had to serve as a shuttlecraft to where full-fledged spacecraft were stationed. Ezekiel's mission was to prophesy and warn his exiled compatriots of the coming day of judgment for all the nation's injustices and abominations. And then, a year later, the same semblance of a man appeared again and put out a hand and grabbed him and carried him all the way to Jerusalem for a prophecy there. The city, it will be remembered, went through a starving siege, a humiliating defeat, and a wanton looting, a Babylonian occupation, the exile of a king, and all the nobility. Arriving there, Ezekiel saw a scene of complacency, breakdown of law and religious observance. Wondering what was going on, he heard the remnant sitting in mourning, bewailing, Yahweh sees us no more, Yahweh has left the earth. So this is why, as we suggest, the reason why Nebuchadnezzar dared to attack Jerusalem again and destroy Yahweh's temple. It was an outcry virtually identical to what Ataguipi had reported from Haran. Sin, the Lord of the gods, became angry with his people and went up to heaven, and the city and the people in it went to ruin. Well, it's, yeah, okay, there's another paragraph here about Marduk being angry and going up, and right afterwards, there's a flood. So here we have Marduk, Enlil of the gods, got angry. Enlil is a word not only that describes one of the first top gods of the Anunnaki, Enki and Enlil, and Marduk is Enki's son, but it's also a title, as in like the king. So the king of the gods. He made an evil plan to disperse the land and its peoples. So his angry heart was bent on the leveling of the land and the destroying of its people. I'm not sure what this is about. Marduk has normally been, his character up until this time has been protective of the people. Even during nuclear war, Enki and Marduk were the only ones to try to protect their people. Everyone else just let their people die. So I'm wondering if they were told that this was an explanation to the people as to why the gods left the earth, was that the gods were angry, like they felt like they had to give a reason. Because to me, it seems like the gods would leave the earth for the deluge. And this was a different deluge than the one that you've heard about. The planets in the ways of Enlil, Anu, and Ea worsened their position and repeatedly disclosed abnormal omens. Aratu, the river of abundance, became a raging current. A fierce surge of water, a violent flood like the deluge, swept through the city, its houses and sanctuaries, turning them to ruins. The gods and goddesses became afraid, abandoned their shrines, and flew off like birds and ascended to heaven. So heaven just means space. Or, and we don't know, we don't know how far the firmament is up. It could include planets. But, so I include this just to show how, right from the beginning, the texts show that the excuse for the gods leaving and around the time of the return of the planet and planetary instability, they gave the reason that they were angry with the people. So I'm going to show that to you. Page 233 now. There's a little summary. I'm trying to get the light to work here. About when the Anunnaki first came. When the Anunnaki, led by Ea, Enki, first came to Earth to obtain the gold with which to protect their planet's endangered atmosphere, they planned to extract the gold from the waters of the Persian Gulf. When that did not work, they shifted to mining operations in southeastern Africa, smelting and refining in the Eden, the future Sumer, Eden. Their number increased to 600 on Earth, plus 300 Igigi, that's the Garuda, who operated celestial craft to a way station on Mars, from which the long-haul spacecraft to Nibiru could be launched more easily. Enlil, Enki's half-brother and rival for the succession, came and was put into overall command. When the Anunnaki toiling in the mines mutinied, Enki suggested that a primitive worker be fashioned, and it was done by genetically upgrading an existing hominid. Then the Anunnaki began to take daughters of the Adam as wives and had children by them. Genesis 6. With Enki and Marduk breaking the taboo, when the deluge came, the outraged Enlil let mankind perish, for the wickedness of man was great on the earth. Well, it was really the wickedness of the Anunnaki, right? But Enki, through a Noah, that was his descendant, frustrated the plan by speaking to Nepishtim was his name, his Anunnaki name, speaking to him through a reed wall. Mankind survived and proliferated, and in time was granted civilization. The deluge that swept over the earth flooded the mines, but exposed a mother lode of gold in the Andes Mountains of South America, enabling Anunnaki to obtain more gold easily and quickly without the need for smelting and refining. For the placer gold, pure gold nuggets washed down the mountains, needing only panning and collecting. It also made it possible to reduce the number of Anunnaki needed on Earth. On their state visit to Earth around 4000 BCE, Anu and Antu, they're from Nibiru visited the post-diluvial, that means after the flood, gold land on the shores of Lake Titicaca. So this is very interesting because they have a story there, and I don't know if it's around this time, of a god rising out of Lake Titicaca. And their space vehicles, I bet you, can go underwater. But they also tell a story of, I think the story is of Viracocha, so they would have that would be his Mayan name, that he was able to walk. He was a benevolent, tall, white being who was able to walk among the countrysides and move the mountains with his hands. And it says in the writings that he carved the land, he formed it in a way that is better for the people. So that's interesting. And that's what they say about Enki in the beginning, that when he went to Africa, or northern Africa, that he did major earth shaping there. I don't know if it was by what means, maybe they used their spaceship for that. The visit served as an opportunity to begin reducing the number of Nibirans on Earth, and it also approved peace arrangements between the rival half-brothers and their warring clans. But while Enki and Enlil accepted the territorial divisions, Enki's son Marduk never gave up the strife for supremacy that included control of the olden space-related sites. It was then that the Enlilites began to prepare alternative spaceport facilities in South America. When the post-diluvial spaceport in Sinai was wiped out with the nuclear war in 2024 BCE, the facilities in South America were the only ones left entirely in Enlilite hands. So these guys are still fighting today. Their children are. So originally I had thought that Marduk was dead. Was alive, sorry. That he was alive because he's very long lived. He's been alive for a long time in this story. But then later on in this chapter it talks about him dying. So we'll get to that. All right. And so when the frustrated and disgusted Anunnaki leadership decided it was time to leave, some could use the landing place. Others, perhaps with a vast haul of gold, had to use the South American facilities near the place where Anu and Antu had stayed during their visit to the area. As earlier mentioned, the place, now called Pumapunku, is a short distance from the shrunken Lake Titicaca shared by Peru and Bolivia, but it was then situated on the lake's southern shores with harbor facilities, and its main remains consist of a row of 4 collapsed structures. Let's see, so this is 4 collapsed structures, and then here's a photograph of it, each made of a single hollowed out giant boulder. Each such hollowed out set of chambers was completely inlaid with gold plates held in place by gold nails, an incredible treasure hauled off by Spaniards when they arrived in the 16th century. How such dwellings were so precisely hollowed out with rocks, and how 4 huge rocks were brought to the site, remains a mystery. There is yet another mystery at the site. The archaeological finds in the place included a number of unusual stone blocks that were precisely cut, grooved, angled. Okay, so they're shown right here. All right. Well, anyway, I want to skip forward to where it talks about Marduk. Before we get there, this talks about who Viracocha is, who Sitchen thinks that Viracocha is. All right, so it says here, there's a tourist favorite is a stone gateway known as the Gate of the Sun, a prominent structure that was also cut from a single boulder, and with some of the precision exhibited at Pumapunku. It probably served as an astronomical purpose, and undoubtedly a calendrical one, as the carved images on the archway indicate, whose carvings are dominated by the larger image of the god Viracocha, holding the lightning weapon that emulated the Near Eastern Adad Teshub, figure 106. I have noticed in this book that these numbers, the 106 that we've seen a lot of different places, it matters. These numbers actually matter in this book. Okay, in the Lost Realms, I have suggested that he was Adad Teshub. The Gate of the Sun is so positioned that it forms an astronomical observation unit with a third prominent structure at Tiwanaku, called the Kalasaya. It is the large rectangular structure with a sunken central courtyard and is surrounded by standing stone pillars. I want to point out that even though the Christians, Yahweh is the God of Abraham, who is basically Enlil, a child sacrificing, vengeful God, Christians will be the first to call these Mayan gods demonic. It's just showing that humans have breaks in their logic, or else logic leaps, depending on what's convenient for their story. Not realizing that if these gods, it's even say, you know, if you believe that Yahweh maybe wasn't a child sacrificer, but had the ability to fly, that he would have a different name in a different place. So anyway, this wasn't Enlil, it was Adad Teshub, and he has a lightning. Oh, here it doesn't. It shows him holding. Let's see if I can get this very close. So it shows him holding these two tools. These are tools. They have bird heads. In the book by Maurice Cotterell, it shows that these are decoding tools. These are basically ciphers, just like in the clock story, where they give you the clock and they show you that they invite you to see the cipher, and you have to figure out the cipher. These overlay over each other, and they show a cipher, because there's these black and these white boxes are keys to interpreting a cipher. And here's the sun gate. Another figure 107A, and it says that this is one of the pictures on this sun gate, and they show the similarity between that and the Hittite pictures of the gods, and it shows them having wings and staffs. So you can see the similarity. However, I just want to point out again that Christians will see anything different from what they have specifically been taught as demonic, not realizing that they themselves are saying that their God is basically not powerful enough to show up in other countries. If they say that all these other gods who have different names but the pictures are the same, you know, that these are demonic and theirs are not demonic. So we have to realize that that's basically brainwashing, where you demonize everything that you don't understand. So it says here that, Ishkur, Adad, Enlil's youngest son. Okay, now we know. I always forget their hierarchy. So Viracocha would have been Enlil's youngest son. Worshipped by the Hittites is Teshub, the weather god, whose symbol was a lightning rod. Such a huge symbol, enigmatically carved on a steep mountainside. This is in my outro. Yeah, I think it's in my outro. And this is the Hittite version of Teshub, and he's holding this. So this is the trident, basically. We see the trident, for example, in the Benjamin Parkway right now. It's also in the seminary, the last place the Pope's going to stay. And that seminary, that trident points to the RFK Stadium. Home base precisely is 119 miles, and then it goes straight to the Sun Pyramid. These are the gods. These are the gods that our elite are still worshiping today. So you can kind of see it as they have given you the correct God that they worship. It's just they haven't told you the whole story, because I think they think that if they told you the whole story, you would figure it out that these are not gods. These are powerful aliens. So they want you to believe that these are omnipotent and you don't have a choice, and you might as well bow down and, sacrifice your children and everything else. And that these, wondrous sights, and they're coming back on clouds and everything like that. But these are basically the same gods that they worship, that the Illuminati worship today. So anything Enlilite, anything that has to do with Enlil's side of the family, or anybody allied with Enlil, would be Yahweh. And then Marduk was the son of Enki, so he kind of took his own name. I think in some places he is referred to as Yahweh too. That's just the whitewashing done by the Nicene Council. This is figure 108. It shows you that this hat, and that this hat has a certain name, and it goes all the way. This is basically an Anunnaki hat, and this is the wizard hat. This is the Santa hat, and then you can't see it here, but they have kind of like Dutch pointed shoes. So long ago, and still so much of our culture is just based on this. It's really amazing. We have tridents everywhere. These guys come out of the water. That's why some of them are thought as water gods. Probably their ships came out of the water. I think that this is a special code. It says here that this is burned into the rock at a depth of 2 feet, and no one knows by whom. But Sitchen speculates it was done by aircraft because it's such a large thing, and it was done perfectly, probably drawn with a laser by an aircraft. So if that's the case, we do see 2 on this side and 3 on this side. So that's a 23, and then it looks like kind of a fleur-de-lis or a tree of life kind of idea in the center, and probably some specific angled triangles here. Some more ideas of what could be drawn from a spaceship, and these would be all drawn with one line without lifting up your pen, basically, or your laser. 8 figure number, and just showing you these figure numbers. That is some code to tell you. So here we have runways, but what it says in the book is that probably these were created by heat. They are not smooth, so there weren't any wheels running on the ground. These are just places where probably ships took off and left heat marks. And there's no rhyme or reason, so they probably just took off, in a lot of different places. This is where I've talked about where the word danger, I think, comes from in our word. That in Anunnaki, these rockets this was called the Din, and this was called the Jur. And they have multi-stage rockets here. And you can imagine from these wars that they would have in the sky, that the people who would maybe learn to speak their language, when they see this, they're going to say danger, danger, and they're probably going to run for cover. Sitchen doesn't really bring that up, but I can just kind of picture that happening. Okay, here's a distortion that Sitchen talks about. He says that this is planet Mars, and that the sign is 6 here, and that could be very possible. And if that's true, we need to think about all of these 6 signs we see on everything from Kinko's to Walmart, and in Washington, D.C. Maybe Washington, D.C., but mostly I wanted to say San Francisco, having to do with Mars. But he says that these guys are talking between Earth and Mars. And this is not Earth. This person is associated with the Pleiades, the 7 stars over here. And then this is an exoplanet of the Pleiades. I don't know if Sitchen is intentionally distorting, or maybe he was, tricked himself into believing that this was a moon. That for some reason, these people who can fly are going to put our dinky little moon next to the 7 stars of the Pleiades, which is a long ways away. Says that the reason why Mars is shown as being a 6 is because it's the 6th planet from the outer, from the 12th, counting in. And that this seal right now is in St. Petersburg in Russia. They should teach this in schools, right? So this little spot right here, if we think of this as deep space in the middle, say this is the Pleiades, somebody from the Pleiades, I want to say that someone from the Pleiades is talking to someone perhaps near Mars. And looks like that this person's wearing a jetpack, has some controls here and a helmet. Well, in deep space, we have, looks like a fish. And then we have the flying disc, and I don't know what this is. It could be a constellation, probably a map. Chapter 14 is called The End of Days, and it talks about South America. The dominant deity was called Viracocha, the creator of all. The Aymara natives of the Andes told of him that his abode was in Tiahuanaco, and that he gave the first two brother and sister couples a golden wand with which to find the right place to establish Cusco, the eventual Inca capital. And it says, okay, so having done all that, then he left. The grand layout, which simulated a square ziggurat with its corners oriented to the cardinal points, then marked the direction of his eventual departure. That's right here. So we have identified the god of Tiahuanaco as Teshub Adad of the Hittite Sumerian pantheon of Enlil's youngest son. In Mesoamerica, the giver of civilization was the winged serpent Quetzalcoatl. We have identified him as Enki's son Thoth of the Egyptian pantheon Ningishzida. So his name in Sumerian was Ningishzida, and the one who in 3113 BC brought over his African followers to establish civilization in Mesoamerica. So, though the time of his departure was not specified, it had to coincide with the demise of his African protégés, the Olmecs, and the simultaneous rise of the native Mayas. Circa 600 to 500 BCE, the dominant legend in Mesoamerica was his promise when he departed to return on the anniversary of his secret number 52. So it was by the middle of the first millennium BCE, and in one part of the world after another, that mankind found itself without its long-worshipped gods. And before long, the question which had been asked by my readers began to occupy mankind: when will they return? Like a family suddenly abandoned by its father, mankind grasped for hope of a return. Then, like an orphan needing help, mankind cast about for a savior. The prophets promised it would surely happen at the end of days. It gets to the part about the abomination of desolation, because people were being desperate for their gods, turned to strange gods, and set up what would be called by the Enlilites abominations. So the story of the last king reflected the new circumstances. He was chosen by sin in his cult center Haran, but he required the consent and blessing of Marduk in Babylon, the celestial confirmation by the appearance of Marduk's planet, and he bore the name Nabu Na'id. This divine co-regime might have been an attempt at the dual monotheism, to coin an expression, but it is an unintended consequence. Its unintended consequence was to plant the seeds of Islam. So that's very interesting. The historical records indicate that neither gods nor people were happy with these arrangements. Sin, whose temple was in Haran, was restored and demanded that his great ziggurat temple in Ur should also be rebuilt and become the center of worship in Babylon, and the priests of Marduk were up in arms. A tablet now in the British Museum is inscribed in it with a text that scholars have titled Nabu Na'id, the clergy of Babylon, and it contains a list of accusations by Babylonian priests against Nabu Na'id. The charge ran from civil matters, law and order not promulgated by him through neglect of the economy. Roads are blocked, lack of public safety. Here's what I'm getting to. He made an image of a god that nobody had seen before in the land. He placed it in the temple and raised it upon a pedestal, and he called it by the name Nanar. With lapis lazuli he adorned it, crowned it with a tiara in the shape of an eclipsed moon, and made for its hand the gesture of a demon. So I'm going to show that this, Sitchen's idea is that this was the abomination. Accusations continued. A strange statue of a deity never before seen, with hair reaching down to the pedestal. It was so unusual and unseemly, the priests wrote, that even Enki and Ninmah, who ended up with strange chimera creatures when they attempted to fashion man, could not have conceived of it. It was so strange that not even the learned Adapa, an icon of the utmost human knowledge, could have named it. To make matters worse, two unusual beasts were confirmed as its guardians, one a deluge demon and the other a wild bull. The king took this abomination and placed it in Marduk's Esagil temple. Even more offending was Nabonid's announcement that henceforth the Akitu festival, during which the near-death resurrection and exile triumph of Marduk was reenacted, would no longer be celebrated. So this is the stopping of the daily sacrifices, or the sacrifices. I don't know if they did it daily. Do you see? Declaring that Nabonid's protective god became hostile to him, and the former favorite of the gods was now fated to misfortune, the Babylonian priests forced Nabonid to leave Babylon and to go into exile in a distant region. It is a historical fact that Nabonid did indeed leave Babylon and took his son Belshazzar, the Belshazzar of the biblical Bible of Daniel, as regent. The distant region to which Nabonid went in self-exile was Arabia. Various inscriptions attest his entourage included Jews from the Judean exiles in the Haran region. His principal base was at a place called Tiema, a caravan center which is now in northern Saudi Arabia and is mentioned several times in the Bible. Recent excavations there uncovered cuneiform tablets attesting to Nabonid's stay. He established 6 other settlements for his followers. 5 of the towns were listed 1,000 years later by Arabian writers as Jewish towns. One of them was Medina, the town where Muhammad founded Islam. That's been in the news recently. The Jewish angle of the Nabonid tale has been reinforced by the fact that a fragment of the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran on the shores of the Dead Sea mention Nabonid and assert that he was suffering in Taima, from an unpleasant skin disease that was cured only after a Jew told him to give honor to the God Most High. All that has led to the speculation that Nabonid was contemplating monotheism only, but to him the God Most High was not the Judeans' Yahweh, but his benefactor Sin, the moon god, whose crescent symbol had been adopted by Islam. Again, okay, so when he says he put a crescent moon there, I think it was an exoplanet. So he created some kind of god, and they stopped worshiping Marduk. And is what they based it, Jesus' story from, because Marduk had a yearly celebration of his death and resurrection. This is all documented. So that would have been the abomination and the ceasing of the festival of Akita, which celebrated Marduk's death and resurrection. Now they're saying that, so this god was taken up. Now Yahweh is basically an Enlilite god. It's just a Judean name for that. Sin's whereabouts fade out of Mesopotamian records after the time of Nabonid. Texts discovered at Ugarit, the Canaanite site on the Mediterranean coast in Syria, now called Ras Shamra, describe, I'm going to just say exoplanet god, because I get tired of saying moon god. Ugh. The exoplanet god is retired with his spouse to an oasis at the confluence of the 2 bodies of water near the cleft of the 2 seas. Ever wondering why the Sinai Peninsula was named in honor of Sin and its main central crossroads in honor of his spouse Nikal? The place is still called in Arabic Nakal. I surmise that the aged couple retired somewhere on the shores of the Red Sea in the Gulf of Eilat. So the Ugaritic texts call them the exoplanet god El, simply God, forerunner of Islam's Allah. Now let's just look to make sure. See, L is 12 and 5, and that's 17, which is pi by Q. And we know that Yahweh, also known as L, is pi derived by 7 twice in the Tetragrammaton. So this god El is a forerunner of Islam's Allah, and his moon crescent symbol crowns every Muslim mosque. Well, George Washington wore a moon symbol, or the exoplanet symbol. This is their secret religion. Also, I want to show this figure to you, because this is important that they put this number here. And as tradition demands, the mosques are flanked to this day by minarets that simulate multi-stage rocket ships ready to be launched. Figure 119. So we know where this architecture comes from. It comes from the Anunnaki, the Nephilim. Yahweh is a Nephilim. El is a Nephilim. All of the pharaohs are Nephilims. Basically, everybody's Nephilim. And that's why all these organized religions have to do with control. So I think Yahshua came to break this idea, this control system up of the religion. He came through a Nephilim family, actually, but he was kind of like a secret agent soul. Like he was a soul that incarnated into a dark family for this mission of breaking up organized religion. And then what they ended up doing was killing him and making another organized religion out of it. Another us versus them and do this or else type of religion. That's why you shouldn't listen to that. And then they wrote the Bible so that they could scare you into complying with this. All right, so let's see. I think I can turn the page and skip this part. I believe a video and an early video read by computer and a blog post about this. So in I actually had to recharge my phone and take a break, but here we are. We're back and charged again. In 560 BC, the Achaemenid king died, and his son Koresh succeeded him on the throne and made his mark on subsequent historic events. We call him Cyrus. Now, I don't know if it says it here, but in the British Museum, there are Cyrus's cylinder seals, and I guess they would. Sorry, adjusting the book. They would make a cylinder seal so that it was like you remember the old Xerox machines where it was like a rolling thing where you basically pressed, like before the Xerox machines, it was like you pressed an ink page around with another ink page. Remember that? I forget what those are called. They had a different name, but so basically it's like doing that, but in clay. So he makes a cylinder seal. Well, anyway, he writes very factually about Marduk Ra and about this period of time. I think I'm going to read it. It might be a different period of time, but anyway, in the British Museum, they have his writings. And this is what they should have in your, instead of a Bible, this is what you should have, is the things that before the Nicene Council. All right, well, anyway, here we go. You know, I know that I say here we go a lot. You know where I get it from? There was this really nice lady. Maybe it'll be less annoying if you know the story. This really nice lady that I know, and she won't watch my channel, but her name was Tara. And she was a mother of 5, and she's a really overachieving but loving, you know, really, you know, putting it all, she put 150% into it, maybe 300%. All her children were beautiful. They all played instruments. Anyway, she was also a musician, and she was one of the volunteers at the orchestra for us, and we got to be friends, and eventually we had a quartet out of our kids. And she helped direct it because I am musical, but not classical musical. So she was directed. Well, anyway, she says, here we go, a lot. And so I guess that stuck with me. But if you think of it in terms of this mom who just put it all on the line, just worked so hard. And she still works so hard. So I don't see her as much anymore. But anyway, that's why I say, here we go, a lot. So I got it from her. She used to do that a lot. But I loved her, so I didn't judge that. Okay, here we go. See, I did it again. I'm going to have to come up with some new things that I say a lot. Okay, the Bible called him Koresh and considered him Yahweh's emissary for conquering Babylon. Okay, so Yahweh needs to conquer Babylon. Okay, overthrowing its king and rebuilding the destroyed temple in Jerusalem. Though thou knowest me, not I, Yahweh, God of Israel, I am thy caller who hath called you by name, and who will help you, though you don't recognize me. The biblical God stated through the prophet Isaiah 44:28-45, 1-4. Okay, so this is the God of Abraham. I really need you to keep in mind that Abraham's God asked for child sacrifice, or at least Abraham had the reason to believe that he was being asked for child sacrifice. So And there's a lot of really questionable history around that. Now, to Abraham's credit, reading in the ancient translations here, I have not seen any direct evidence talking about any sacrifice. So that could have been an Islamic and a Vatican twist on there. However, I still do believe that Yahweh is the name for the Elohim of the Anunnaki. And probably the Elohim are not, it's not the God that you think of. It's not the creator of the universe. It's not, ultimate love. It's not that God. It's the God who gets involved in wars and demands loyalty, or else. That's what Yahweh is. And it's also pi, derived by 7. In kingship was most dramatically foretold in the book of Daniel. Now this is why I'm bringing you all this, and I wanted to give you all the background and not take it out of context. And I feel like the more background we have, the more stable we are in our feeling about what's really going on. So that's why I wanted to bring you all that background. I could make short little sound bites on this, but I don't think it serves the purpose. So because Daniel 5, actually Daniel is just really being quoted heavily by Christians right now, and I have a feeling that the Christians, I'm hoping they won't be very, very sad, but I have a feeling that they are interpreting the book of Daniel in an incorrect way, and possibly they are being led to this idea by, the Vatican, which is in control of all of the Christian churches. So I just throw that out there. Here we go. I'm going to try to stop saying that, but okay, here we go. I mean, I need something else to say. One of the Judean exiles taken to Babylon, Daniel was serving in the Babylonian court of Belshazzar when, during a royal banquet, a floating hand appeared and wrote on the wall, "Mene, mene, tekel upharsin." And I have a blog post on this and a early video. It's probably computer read. It's very interesting, and the work that I did in Google Earth is extremely... I can't believe that I'm not getting more views on that. I think some of the work that I've done in Google Earth is some of the most important things that anybody could know about. These alignments are wild. So please see the videos about ancient Babylon and the eye of Isis over there. And this many, many tekel and the floating hand happened inside the eye of Isis. Okay, astounded and mystified, the king called his wizards and seers together to decipher the inscription, but none could. As a last resort, the exiled Daniel was called in, and he told the king the inscription's meaning. "God has weighed Babylon and its king, finding them wanted, numbered their days, and they will meet their end by the hands of the Persians." And 539 BCE, Cyrus crossed the Tigris River into Babylonian territory, advanced on Sippar, where he intercepted a rushing back Nabu-Naid, and then, claiming that Marduk himself had invited him, entered Babylon without a fight. Welcomed by priests who considered him a savior from the heretic Nabu-Naid and his disliked son, Cyrus. Cyrus grasped the hands of Marduk as a sign of homage to the god, but he also, in one of his very first proclamations, rescinded the exile of the Judeans, permitting the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, and ordered the return of all the temple's ritual objects that were looted by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so this is the fighting between the houses of the Anunnaki. Now, it's tempting to think Yahweh was fighting against the Nephilim. I really doubt that. Okay. The returning exiles, under the leadership of Ezra and Nehemiah, completed the rebuilding of the temple, henceforth known as the Second Temple, in 516 BCE, exactly as was prophesied by Jeremiah 70 years earlier. Because the Nephilim not only know the future, but they can make sure that it happens. The first temple was destroyed. After the first temple was destroyed, the Bible considered Cyrus to be an instrument of God's plans, an anointed of Yahweh. Historians believe that Cyrus proclaimed a general religious amnesty that allowed each people to worship as they pleased. So as to what Cyrus himself might have believed, to judge by the monument he erected for himself, he appears to have envisioned himself as a winged cherub. Here's a picture. I'll get closer. So I'm just looking at the ram's head on here, and that's because he has ram's horns because he is basically sponsored by Marduk. And it's the age of the ram, and that's the sign of Marduk. And then on his ram's horns, I'm going to say that those are the Trinity of Sons, but there's something kind of, I really can't make it out better than that. And then he has upward wings and downward wings, and it looks like he has the texture on his dress of the Anunnaki gods. Now this version, this book, I think was written after the last book I had read, and another book that I read about Cyrus and Marduk going into Babylon, and what the cylinder seal in the British Museum says is that they rode alongside, Marduk rode alongside Cyrus, apparently on horses or something like that, and they had a bunch of troops with them, and they basically rode together into Babylon, and there was no resistance, and then they took over Babylon. But this story makes it sound a little different than that. But the other book said that that's how it happened. So you have to go to the British Museum and read it yourself in Sumerian. Cyrus, some historians attach the epithet the Great to his name, consolidated into a vast Persian empire all the lands that had once been Sumer, Akkad, Mari, Mitanni, Hatti, and Elam, Babylonia, and Assyria, and it was left to his son Cambyses to extend the empire to Egypt. Egypt was recovering from a period of disarray, some consider a third intermediate period, during which it was disunited and changed capital several times and was ruled by invaders from Nubia, or had no central authority at all. Egypt was also in disarray religiously, its priests uncertain as to who to worship, so much that the leading cult was that of the dead Osiris. That's what they're worshiping today. That's what the Freemasons worship. The leading deity, the female Neith, whose title was Mother of God, and the principal cult object, a bull. You know that people still worship bulls today, right? The bulls. If you just drive around your city, you're going to see bulls everywhere, and that's what you're eating. When you eat bulls, you're actually eating. You're doing a ritual called cannibal of the god. Okay, for whom elaborate funerals were held, the Apis bull. Cambyses, like his father, was no religious zealot and let people worship as they pleased. Even he, according to inscribed stela now in the Vatican Museum, learnt the secrets of the worship of Neith and participated in the ceremonial funeral of the Apis bull. Those religious laissez-faire policies brought the Persians peace in their empire, but not forever. Rest, uprisings, and rebellions kept breaking out almost everywhere. Especially troublesome were the growing commercial, cultural, and religious ties. Okay, let me look at this and see if I can skip some. It talks about the struggles between the Greeks, the Spartans, and the Macedonians, and the Macedonians basically got the upper hand. No sooner did the Macedonians get the upper hand on the mainland than their king, Philip II, sent armed corps over to the Straits of Hellespont, today's Dardanelles, to secure the loyalty of the Greek settlements. In 334 BCE, his successor, Alexander the Great, heading an army 15,000 strong, crossed into Asia. Okay, Alexander's astounding victories and resulting subjugation of the ancient East to Western or Greek dominion have been told and retold by historians. And they do teach this in public schools. They didn't when I was little, though. My son learned about this. Probably, maybe not accurately, but starting with some who had accompanied Alexander need no repetition here. What does need to be described are the personal reasons for Alexander's foray into Asia and Africa. For apart from geopolitical or other economic reasons for Greek-Persian Great War, there was Alexander's own personal quest. There had been persistent rumors in the Macedonian court that not King Philip, but a god, an Egyptian god, was Alexander's true father, having come to the queen Olympias, disguised as a man. With the Greek pantheon that derived from across the Mediterranean Sea and headed like the Sumerian 12 by 12 Olympians, those are Sumerians, those are Nephilim, and that's where we get Zeus from. with tales of the gods, myths that emulated the Near Eastern tales of the gods. An appearance of one such god in the Macedonian court was not deemed an impossibility. With court shenanigans that involved a young Egyptian mistress of the king and a marital strife that included divorce and murders, the rumors were believed first and foremost by Alexander himself. Well, plus, now we have also the story of the Virgin Mary being overshadowed by a god. So this is what happened apparently. Well, this was the story with Alexander's mother. And the reason why they believe this is because this was going on a lot. Because these guys are shapeshifters. They can switch into birds and snakes and also different kinds of people. So she might not have known. That was not her husband. A visit by Alexander to the oracle in Delphi to find out whether indeed he was the son of a god and therefore immortal only intensified the mystery. He was advised to seek an answer at the Egyptian sacred site, and thus as soon as the Persians were beaten in the first battle, Alexander, rather than pursuing them, left his main army and rushed to the oasis Siwa in Egypt. There the priests assured them that he was indeed a demigod, the son of the ram god Amun. This is when the Christians say Amen, this is who they're talking about. In celebration, Alexander issued silver coins showing him with ram's horns, figure 121, the synagogue of Satan on this number right here, 33. Okay? What about immortality? And while the course of the resumed warfare and Alexander's conquests had been documented, oh, here's the coin. Can you see that? Synagogue of Satan number right there. Because that's Amun-Ra. He's the son of Amun-Ra. Documented by his campaign historian, Callisthenes, and other historians, his personal quest for immortality is mostly known from sources deemed to be pseudo-Callisthenes or the Alexander romances. The embellished fact with legend, as detailed in the Stairway to Heaven, the Egyptian priests directed Alexander from Siwa to Thebes. There on the Nile River's western shore, he could see in the funerary temple built by Hatshepsut the inscription attesting to her being fathered by the god Amun when he came to her mother disguised as the royal husband, exactly like the tale of Alexander's demigod conception. In the temple of Ra-Amun in Thebes, in the Holy of Holies, Alexander was crowned as a pharaoh. Then, following the directions given in Siwa, he entered subterranean tunnels in the Sinai Peninsula, and finally he went to where Amun-Ra, alias Marduk, alias Zeus, was, to Babylon. Resuming the battles with the Persians, Alexander reached Babylon in 331 BCE. This number I have seen in some of the codes, and now I'm thinking, what if it has to do with this date? Because this is a big date. Alexander, son of Marduk, reaches Babylon. Very interesting, right? Entered the city riding in his chariot. In the sacred precinct, he rushed to the Esagil Ziggurat temple to grasp the hands of Marduk as conquerors had done before, but the great god was dead. According to pseudo-sources, Alexander saw the god lying in a golden coffin, his body immersed or preserved in special oils. True or not, the facts are that Marduk was no longer alive and that his Esagil Ziggurat was without exception described as a tomb by subsequent established historians. All right. So we learned about Daniel. We learned about the Abomination of Desecration. We learned about Marduk Ra being the father of Alexander the Great. So there was a lot in here, actually. All right, I hope you liked that. Talk to you soon.